Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is JP Gralty, and I'm an implementation specialist at SkillSpout. And my background being in nonprofits and mission-oriented organizations here in Northeast Ohio, I am particularly excited about this conversation we have for you today. This is AI is already in the room. Now what? A practical conversation for nonprofit leaders. And we're joined today by two wonderful guests. So I'll be your moderator today, but we have Annette Iwamoto, director of the Cuyahoga Human Services Chamber, and Mel McGee, CEO of SkillSpout. Uh,
Hello.
and so we're here today to talk a little bit about how nonprofits can help their teams engage with AI. And so yeah, with that, I think we'll just dive right in and get things started. And Annette and Mel, as you go, if you want to give a short introductory piece about yourself as well for anybody who doesn't already know you, I think most of our folks probably already know Annette since they're part of the Human Service Chamber. But so Annette, why don't you go first? Our starting question for you is from where you sit leading a Chamber of Human Service organizations, how would you characterize where most nonprofits in your network actually are with AI right now? Is it more fear, curiosity, or quiet experimentation?
Hi everyone. Yeah, I know that we have some peers of the Human Service Chamber in the room. So just to briefly share that the Cuyahoga Human Services Chamber is really here to serve as a collective voice for the human service sector in the greater Cleveland area and a platform for collaboration and mutual support. As of today, we have nearly 130 nonprofit members, and they represent the diversity of the sector. So we have organizations that are all volunteer run and led, all the way up to some of the largest social service agencies in town, all members of the chamber, and hopefully using us as a way to collaborate and connect and know that with the diversity of the sector, we also see a diversity of opinions in of AI. So we know that leaders of our nonprofit organizations are all over the map in terms of maybe resisting adopting AI or being super adopters, and the people who are on the first to use the latest releases of what's going on with AI tools. And what we also know is that their staff are also all over the map, so they may be using it with or without directive from agency leadership. They might be using it in their work, or they're also really resistant to the idea of of using it during their workday or how it might impact their job in the coming days, months, years. So I see all of those opinions, and trying to manage that is a huge task. And so that's part of the reason why we wanted to have this conversation.
I love that, Annette. If you don't mind, I'll piggyback a little bit. Hey, everybody, I'm Mel McGee. I am CEO and co-founder of SkillSpout. I have a unique perspective on AI, given the fact that I come from a background that is very, very tech focused. I started programming as a kid. I'm that computer science nerd that you have as a friend over there. But I also have a very strong interest in human services, human first AI adoption, and work with a lot of nonprofits. I've always had one foot in education. I've taught everywhere from data science at Case Western's Weatherhead School of Management to kids camps, and anyone, anywhere, someone will let me talk to them about tech and AI. I've been in technology professionally for nearly 30 years in software development and training and strategy. I've also been in AI, believe it or not, for over 20 years, way before ChatGPT, obviously. However, I'm hyper focused on human first AI adoption and doing it safely and responsibly in a structured way. And it's interesting, Annette, you were talking about, there's a lot of people, there are people all over the spectrum about, very forward, like move forward fast or slow down, and everywhere in between. And one thing that I thought was interesting is regardless of where you stand, you can't ignore it. right? You either have to, even if it's a simple policy, like we recognize, some of you may be, using AI. We choose not to use it at our organization, something like that. But to acknowledge it with your team, I think is a hugely important step to take, regardless of where you stand or where you stand within that range.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and for that intro, Mel, and that response. Just a follow up, in your work with organizations across different sectors on AI adoption and training, Mel, when you think about nonprofit leaders specifically,
Mhm.
what's the most common thing they're getting wrong about where they are on the AI adoption curve, or what's the most helpful thing for this particular audience?
Yeah, I think where they are in the AI adoption curve, I think one of the biggest misconceptions that I've seen is that AI is like any other tool, like Microsoft Word. And, it's fine. It'll just come in and it's just like another technology. And it's not. It's much more than that. And it takes a lot more consideration, not only from learning it, but from governing it, from considering where people will remain involved in the process and ensuring that people are involved in the process. Also, um, there's some tools, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in detail later, but you already have tools at your disposal that you might not be aware of, that you can get some leverage out of it if you choose. Or if you choose not to participate, you should know that they exist still. And so you can know how to potentially turn them off if you'd like. But yeah, overall, that's where I see things, people getting it wrong. They're treating it like just another software technology, and it's not. It's very, very much bigger than that with bigger considerations, right?
Well, that I think intersects really well with especially this sector, right? So, Annette, from your seat with, thinking about human service nonprofits, these organizations, the organizations of, represented by folks on this call, serve some of the most vulnerable people in our communities. How does that raise the stakes when it comes to how AI gets used or misused in the organizations?
Well, I think one of the first things I think about is that a lot of the questions that we have about AI are not new or without precedent. Mel, you talked about following this, being part of it for 20 years. I'm thinking back to 10 years ago when I was working at Providence House and talking about predictive analytics in child welfare and a lot of the questions that brought up. And those are the questions that we think about now with more wider adoption of AI in our organizations, and some of the consequences. AI relies on historical data, and in human services especially, that data often reflects longstanding inequities. So if we're relying solely on that, then we might be missing some things. There's consequences of using AI. If you're using it solely, relying on it solely to make decisions, then you could be denying essential services to someone who really needs it. And so I think that human-centered aspect is something that I really appreciate that you talk about. But also, nonprofit services rely so much on relationship building. So if AI is not used responsibly, you have a lot of risk of eroding relationships that are really essential for how we deliver services and how we work together with other nonprofit partners. If data is mishandled, and you're using AI, that can expose private information, and over reliance on AI generated content, thinking about how we communicate with the people we serve and the people we trust and rely on to help us provide services through fundraising and things like that, that can really lead to tone deaf communications. So there's a lot to consider when it comes to adopting AI, in the nonprofits, and especially because we provide such important services and support people who really rely on us to be flexible and utilize a lot of problem solving and how we address their needs.
I think you bring up a huge point about the ethics, the bias, all of that, it does. I believe people need to be trained on that to see it. AI is trained on data, right? And data that we create. And, we're humans are biased, and AI doesn't know any better not to be. That human element is super important, and it doesn't go away. It's not like you're going to program or train or, prompt your way out of having to maintain ownership of quality of final product and what is going out. And there's a governance involved, right? How much do you want to trust AI in different parts of your workday and your, organizational research? How do you get the most out of things like research? How do you make sure the sources are correct? How do you use your taste in judgment, in knowledge? And that's such a important part of being the human. And it's called human in the loop. You'll hear me say it over and over again, but being the human inside of AI that is leading AI versus just throwing AI slap down, like you were saying. I think that's very important.
Mel, just following up on that a little bit, I know Annette also mentioned, the sensitive data that these organizations have, especially right when dealing with folks on the margins. Can you unpack that a little bit about, what do these nonprofit leaders need to be thinking about, both with kind of data security and beyond just, kind of typical IT concerns when it comes to AI specifically in the organization?
Yeah, I think the simplest approach is for anything that you're putting in AI, if you wouldn't put it on a billboard, be very, very careful. And I think using that as a guiding principle is goes a long way. If you already have, for example, Microsoft, and you're using Copilot, which is Microsoft's AI, you have the same securities as long as you're logged in under your organizational account, right? It's the same securities as you would have using, email through your Microsoft instance or storing something on SharePoint or OneDrive, for example. So you have, if you already have that, you can feel a little safer, going into Microsoft tools, but still be thoughtful about what you're putting in there. Why? Somebody could, think worst case scenario. What I typically do doesn't mean you can't use AI. You just have to be thoughtful about, instead of using people's names or addresses or things that you can join together to figure out who a person is, abstract that, or just put variables there that aren't associated with any individual or something like that. So just be thoughtful of it. If you wouldn't share it in an email, don't share it within your AI tool. Also, be thoughtful about what you're using and what your team is using for AI tools. So it is important to get a perspective on who's using what version. For example, how many people at your organization are using ChatGPT? How many of those are using personal versions of their ChatGPT? How can you bring them on if they are using that? How can you bring them on to something that you have more agency over within your organization? For example, Copilot. Some things they might not know about some of the safety concerns, security issues, and such. If they're using a personal version of a large language model like Claude or ChatGPT, they'll need to, adjust their security settings, make sure they're not training the model on your data, things like that. Annette, what do you think?
I'm thinking back to even last year when we hadn't started using Copilot at Community Solutions, didn't have access to kind of that safer version. Yeah,
Mhm.
when I would use ChatGPT, I would change the names, like all proper names,
Yeah.
to try to protect that, but also that can is also more time consuming sometimes. So there's things like that. I was using it more to summarize like a 50-page article or research document. And so to me, that was, that's information that's already out there, but was able to help me do my work a little bit faster. Yeah. The other thing I think about with AI is that it loves to compliment you. So, if I'm trying to analyze a document with it, sometimes it's a little bit too affirming of yeah, what you're saying is correct. And it's harder to get it to find some of those nuances. And I think that's where like the research critical thinking skills that hopefully I bring to the human service chamber role of knowing the other places to pull information from that provide color to what's happening in current events is really important. And AI is not always great, anyways, at keeping up with current events either. But uh, there's so much in considerations of like the safety of just using those AI tools that are out there and not really knowing what the information we feed it, where that goes.
Yeah, I think if you, for example, are a co-pilot, shop, if folks have Microsoft, 365, even the basic version, you can utilize some of, that to really help you stay more secure than you would if you're using an outside or personal license on another tool. So that does tend to help with things like PII and all of the, things we care about in the nonprofit world, right? The I things, outside of that, you do have to be concerned about the models training off of your data for sure. But if you do have a Microsoft 365 instance, it helps. And there's one trick you can do if you're looking, for example, for sources, if, you can ask the large language model to cite its sources and then say, hey, make sure you're checking, use the web to update the latest, to gather the latest information from this past month or something and prove it to me. I always say, prove it to me if I'm uncertain about it and hallucinating. I'll also ask it to explain where there might be biases in some of its outputs. So that's sometimes helpful. Like read this and tell me where I might be missing some bias or some ethical challenges. And sometimes it'll pop back information for you that you have never thought about before. So it's helpful for review, but using it as an assistant versus it leading you, right, is the key here. Is you're leading it.
So just to hop in, Mel used the term PII, and if any other jargon is used, I am going to step in as moderator and say
Thank you.
PII is personally identifiable information, and so that's any sensitive data that we want to be extra careful of. And so, Mel and Annette, if either of you use any jargon, I will step in and just make sure that everybody knows what we're talking about because we're here to make this accessible. And so, yeah, we can definitely have make sure that everybody's understanding what we're talking about.
Thank you, JP.
Nice. So, Mel, thinking about this from a leadership standpoint in nonprofits, what's the most constructive step that leaders can take in approaching the use of AI within their organizations, right? Especially in human service nonprofits, right? It's so, in many ways, the sector itself, right, is very responsive, right, to client needs, or this is the thing here, or hey, this funder just put out an RFP, right? But how can we be strategic in the sector? How can leaders take an intentional step, right, to thinking about AI in your
Yeah, I think having a vision is important, understanding your stance, where, and bring together the leaders in your team, whether it's just a couple of you or whether it's a group. Bring together folks on the team to say, where you lead it. Once more, you're leading AI. Don't have it lead you. So figure out where you want to be. There's a whole spectrum where you could say, we want to land here for now. For example, if you're saying we want to use Copilot as a chatbot to help us gain a few hours back a week, that's great, and that could be where you want to end up now. Or we would like to, by the end of the year, have, 6 hours per person back a week, right? And we want to use some agentic AI, but we want to ensure that we are being thoughtful about where we make sure everybody on the team knows how to use it, responsibly, which tools they can use, how to, and where humans need to be in the loop, right? And if you're using AI and it's more of a workflow, more of some kind of automation, which parts of it are important to your organization so that you're making sure human eyes are on that before it's seen by anyone or it's used in any of your materials or used for research or anything like that. So we have a vision and direction strategy session. So I'll just say that come up with a vision and direction strategy session for your team. Even if it's a small one, saying where would we like to be by when and why? And it could be we're not adopting AI. We choose not to, and we're going to create a policy and we're going to review it again in the fourth quarter. Or it could be we want AI on the org chart, or going all the way here and adopting it as fully as possible. But I think that is one of the most important things that leaders can do, is just get that vision and make sure that you explain it to the team very clearly. I also think train them up on responsible AI usage.
Thanks, Mel. Well, so we'll use that to pivot over to Annette. When you think about nonprofits in your network, I think everybody in the sector knows capacity is always stretched thin, right? And there's a lot of capacity realities in the sector. What are the actual constraints that leaders are working with when they try to think about doing something new like this, right? Having an adoption change, or even finding the time, right, to set out a vision and strategy.
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts here, so I'm gonna hopefully go about presenting all of them while still being coherent, and hopefully JP will help me a bit with that. But I do think there's a governance gap here in how AI is already showing up with a lot of nonprofits not having any policies in place on where AI maybe can and can't be used, or training of staff on how to use it, or oversight on how it's being used. You may not even know if your staff is using it or not. And there's a lot of risk in AI, especially if it's not being used properly. And we know that many of our organizations are working in an environment where capacity is really limited, and this technology is moving so fast. There's new tools with it coming out each week. It's getting better at some things over time. And this is all happening when we are in an environment where funding is very unstable. There's a lot of lack of predictability in what we know is going to be true for us in the next 6 months, year or two. And that makes things like implementing AI strategy, training in governments even harder to achieve. We know every new initiative, even if it's something that's going to save us time and resources, eventually still can take away from the direct services, which are always going to be the priority in the human services sector. So, thinking a lot about how can we help people adopt AI responsibly when we know that it's competing with all that day-to-day work, and also across the spectrum of organizations where not everyone has even transitioned fully from using paper and pen. We still have organizations struggling with just the very basics of data security and the idea of phishing emails being able to really compromise a lot of things within your organization. I know that it has assisted me tremendously in my role, especially being a team of one. I don't know how I would have gotten through this past year and the information I've been able to share out to the network without being able to use AI. So I wanted to be able to help our Human Service Chamber members be able to adopt it responsibly, and also, really being aware that there's a lot of hesitancy, especially when we have organizations who work in areas of health and environmental considerations. Those are all big questions still that AI is people are tackling with adopting AI, and being understanding of all of those perspectives there.
Well, I want to hear what Mel thinks about all of that, right? Especially that last piece. There's a lot of fear and anxiety that we hear about AI in the world, in training rooms. How do you see that showing up? About all of these things, AI coming for jobs, AI, impact on the environment, and how do you help organizations think about that, work through it, especially in some of these organizations where there might be people all along that spectrum within the organization, right, working together on the same mission and work.
Yeah, I mean, you have to respect those concerns. Those are real concerns, How do you do this in a way that is respectful to all of the individuals in your organization and your constituents and the other, anyone you serve, it's a difficult challenge. I think we focus on human first AI strategy, adoption, training. So I think keeping, having a mindset that this isn't just tech training, this is change management. It's a different way of working in the world. Understanding, like if you want to use AI but want to be thoughtful about your environmental impact, is there a way to do it? And I'm going to say yes, there is a way to do it. There are different models that take up amounts of energy, and understanding what those models are, how to reduce your AI footprint. If you do choose to use it, and that is a concern, that is something you can absolutely do. From a training perspective and a workforce perspective, will AI take my job? I think that's a legitimate, people have that concern. You have to understand that. Yes, that's a concern. And I don't know a single person in a nonprofit who isn't like, doesn't do the job of three people. So yes, AI, that's how I feel. AI, please take one of my jobs. I'm being tongue in cheek here, but uh, my point being is that, and I know, Annette, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that too. From my perspective, it's something that I hope nonprofits can leverage, because you're doing such great work and serving so many people in need. I think out of any group, it would, who can really leverage this for good, it would be in the nonprofit sector. The the ideas that I think are people definitely still need to be in the loop when it comes to using AI. You don't just set a whole bunch of AI tools, or I hope you wouldn't, and cross your fingers and hope for the best. It's not, when you're using large language models, AI, as we're speaking about them, like ChatGPT, Copilot, and all of these other Claude, all of these tools, they are probability machines. And what do I mean? I mean, they are not like typical programs. It's not like, if this something for sure is going to happen. It's more like, if this, I'm pretty sure something is going to happen, but I can't guarantee it, right? So think about, Mary had a little, I'm guessing most of you are going to say lamb. If I go to another country, I'm not so sure though. Can I guarantee that an email is going to be written by AI that is not going to say something that I don't anticipate in there? So anyways, back to the point of how can we leverage AI, and is it going to take your job? No, because you need to oversee AI. And with AI, some of the things you can do is help take a lot of the mundane pressures, the tasks from your day. Take those mundane points off your plate so that you can get to the relationships. You can get to the heart of your mission, the heart of your work, versus, dealing with first drafts of a blog post or a first draft of an email to your, sponsors or, some of the people who are supporting you, right? Maybe you're using it to do research, and some of that research that could take you a week, then your job is to review that research and make sure AI isn't just making things up. And how would you do that? You would say, cite your work. You would say, give me probabilities of each of these being accurate. Things like that can help you gain time back in your day, but you're still in control of it. So no, I don't think it's going to take jobs, but I think it's important to be respectful of the individuals in your organization so that they understand that you're not going to use this to replace them. You're going to use this to help them out and to assist them. And it can hopefully give them some time back in their day to do meaningful things.
Yeah, I think, kind of going off of that a little bit, I think about that some of that is leadership decisions. Like, maybe it takes less time to do the paperwork of serving 10 people. It doesn't mean we make our staff serve 15 people instead. Hopefully we're serving those 10 people better. I think those are kind of leadership decisions that we would have to make within our own organizations or as a sector. But some of those mundane tasks absolutely is where I think AI helps me the most. A lot of it is just organizing thoughts. I feel like I have so many ideas swirling in my mind all the time, and sometimes I'm able to just dump it into these AI tools, and it helps me organize them better. I used it recently to time block my calendar for 2 weeks. I'm in a very busy event time these past 2 weeks, and I had also very specific things I wanted to get done. And because I use Copilot, it already has access to my calendar, and it was able to time block my work based on when I was also uh, presenting or had other events going on. And it also did a good job of blocking out time to eat, which I thought I didn't ask it to do, but I thought that was nice of it. So I do think it helps. I've heard of other people. I'm a working mom who don't spend as much time up late at night planning out their next day because they're able to use AI to help with that. So it's a hope of mine that we can do better work, relationship building work, working in person, because we have these tools at our disposal.
I'll just add, I'm in the same boat, Annette. I'm a working dad, and I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. And the biggest fan of me using AI in my work is my 4-year-old, because that means I'm not, working on follow-up emails or, taking notes or blocking my day. At the end of the day, I'm playing with him when he's done with the school, right? I get to be more human because of some of the load that I'm able to share with AI, right? Well, continuing on from there, my next question is for you again, Annette. You know, how is this different, or is it, than other change initiatives that have come through, right? We always see, oh, here's new technology, new regulations, new thing coming down the pipeline, is the only constant in this work in many ways, right? That change. How is this different? Is this different from what you've seen across the years in the sector? Does it feel different to you?
Yeah. One way I've heard people compare it a little bit to Twitter coming on board. How that was kind of a tool that people, or I don't know if you would even call it a tool, but that was something that as it became more prominent and people in the nonprofit sector were thinking, how do we use this? What does it look like? I know there was a point in my life that I felt like it was really important for me to like be someone on Twitter and like show that I could be like a thought leader by what I was sharing on Twitter. And I know a lot of nonprofits were having those discussions 15 or so years ago. And those kind of that social media influx is still here, still something we're managing. But there things have come over the past 50 years that have changed the way we work. The internet is definitely one of those things where I feel like that has, dramatically transformed our workforce and how we do our day-to-day jobs. But that happens so slowly compared to how AI is here. But again, it's kind of building off this technology that has been growing for some time. And the other thing I think uh, that I would just add is that there does need to be some time just to pause and think through how we're using it and what it looks like. Boulay, who is someone who is well known in the nonprofit space, kind of a, I guess, thought leader. He has a blog that comes out on Tuesdays and a new book on nonprofits and philanthropy. Had his blog post today was about AI and nonprofits and kind of walking through all of the ways we could be skeptical about it. But he ends by talking about there's a lot of corporations that we also aren't very pleased with a lot of the work that they do, yet we still utilize them in how we make those decisions. So, I think that this is different because of the way how fast it's moving, but as a society, there's always new things coming on board that we have to adapt and figure out how we utilize.
Yeah, I don't think it's use AI or don't, I think that the question really is, where does AI create disproportionate value for the members you serve? And where can you use it to for best bang for the buck, right? So is it, if you're concerned about using it, my thought would be be thoughtful about how you're using it, where you're using it, where you're not using it, when you're not using it. Maybe you put boundaries around your use of it. um, Free up time for advocating at the policy level about where the use is, water rights, grid rules, other kinds of decisions that are very important for AI policy throughout the world. I'd say try to free up time that way. The reality is, I don't know if not using it and stating we're not going to use it is going to stop gaming and finance and all the other industries from going forward anyway. So that would be, if you're concerned. I saw somebody had a question about that, and it seemed like you were headed there, Annette, is that if you're concerned about AI and using it responsibly, that would be my take on being thoughtful about the models you use, the lower energy models, using it around certain times, and advocating for responsible AI governance and research to help with energy trade-offs and environmental concerns as well.
And just a note on the structure of the session, I think I forgot. That's on me. I apologize. Our formal panel here will wrap up in about 5 minutes at 12:45, and then we'll have time for those questions in Q&A. So thank you so much. It just says anonymous attendee who submitted that question. So thank you so much for submitting that. And please, if you have questions or if you've been sitting on them, please feel free to put those into the Q&A, and we'll make sure that we get to as many of those as we can during the time. As we're kind of moving forward and wrapping up this more, kind of formal part, Mel, where should these nonprofit leaders start, right? Like AI is this big thing. It can be really overwhelming. What's a first step? What's a next step they can take, especially given limited time, limited budgets, right? Limited attention and all of that to us.
Yeah. Obviously, I'm going to say education. That's where I always start with something new. Being continuous learners. If we provide education for teams. However, there are a lot of things like this as well. A lot of opportunities to join webinars like this. Reach out to me. For example, I'm happy to chat. Or there's YouTube. There's other places you can get information and learn for free as well if you don't have much of a budget. If you have some budget, we provide training. SkillSpout provides training for organizations and the like. And that's where I'd start. If I'd start just getting ground, and then testing some of these things on my own. If you have Copilot, test it there. If you don't, be very thoughtful about what you're putting in. Regardless, be thoughtful about what you're putting in, but try it out and try AI is a conversational partner, not just like Google. It's very different from Google. And I know we have people on this different ends of the spectrum in the room. But if you're just starting out, remember, it's not Google. Think about it like you're the director, it's an actor, and it can take on different personas that you give it. And start there. Try it out.
Awesome. Thanks, Mel. Um, Annette, just to give you kind of a wrap up, point, what of the formal part, what do you wish more nonprofit leaders understood about this moment, and where are those, kind of watch points, either, diving in too fast or waiting too?
Yeah, I think, as nonprofit leaders, the most important thing is really uh, having these conversations about where AI can safely support our work, where human judgment really needs to stay central. Depending on your organization and scope of work, it may be important to outline these are areas where you don't use AI to make decisions. There's sometimes that human intuition is much more important. And where we're not willing to use it because we know of the risks in data exposure or other concerns that align with your organization's mission and values. I think those are all really important considerations. That the chamber overall, our purpose is to be a resource for this sector and for this network. So letting me know how are there ways we can support, whether that's providing templates, maybe it's too much for your organization to offer training to all of your staff, but can the chamber be a resource for that? That's part of the reason why the Human Service Chamber came about, why it was created, was to be that resource for our sector. And so having those conversations with me, and also that we're all in this together. The human service sector is not just about these like hard skills or concrete tools that we can provide, but being that support where you can talk through these challenges with other leaders who are facing similar situations. I'm always available, but also coming to some of our events where you're able to connect with people in person to kind of figure out these challenges that are facing us. They're not going away. This is just one of many. So, that's always going to put in a plug for how the chamber can be a resource as well.
That's awesome. And I put the link. There's another resource that I wanted everyone to be aware of. We're not sure if it's coming back or not. It has historically helped organizations within the state of Ohio with Ohio employees. It's called Tech Cred. It's a program for reimbursement for tech training, which you might want to take advantage of. So if you want to join the wait list for Tech Cred, I dropped that in the chat.
Well, thank you both so much for those remarks. We've got a bunch of questions already flowing in, so I'll just field those to you, and whoever wants to jump in and can answer. So somebody asked, any suggestions of on-demand programs for individuals wanting to brush up on their AI skills?
YouTube. Yeah, there's also, all the major providers, Claude, you can join, look through their resources for guidelines as well.
And I do see them popping up here and there. So I think if you just keep your eye out also, and we'll try to push through anything that might be available upcoming as well. But one thing in putting this together is I felt like there was more and more AI trainings being offered, but a space to think through everything around it that nonprofit leaders need to consider was something that didn't really exist. So I wanted to start here.
I love that. And I mean, the reality is it's not just, I know we keep repeating this, it's not just training. I mean, especially for organizations, there's governance concerns, there's workflow and data and all of this. And how does it all work together to give you the best results and using it, uh, putting stuff you do often into a custom agent or a custom GPT, for example, ways you can leverage it and share it with your team, and making sure people are accessing the best information so they're getting the most out of their prompts and the right information from their prompts as well.
Awesome. I'm going to keep us moving through. We have a great question here from Kevin. Kevin asks, how should a nonprofit leader present and explain the benefits of creating a strategic AI usage policy to their board, which may have some members who are skeptical and generally against utilizing AI for any purpose?
Great question. There are a ton of benefits. How I would go about it is I would go in my secure large language model, and I would ask it to help me put together a presentation. I would explain as much as I could about the situation, and I would ask for the result to be something ready for the board who are skeptical, exactly what you asked us here. I would put that into a large language model to brainstorm and have a conversation about that, I think regardless, I think to tell them, listen, if you think no one at the organization is using AI, you're most likely incorrect. It's typically at least 50, 60% of people at organizations are using AI behind the scenes if you haven't provided them with something. So that's called shadow AI usage. Tell them, look up the statistics around that, explain to the board members that this is being used. Then I would also let the board members understand that if folks aren't trained and you don't have a path, whatever that path might be, in governance around it, that you will have shadow AI and information could be shared with AI that is not intentional. It's just because of lack of knowledge. It's sort of like an idea of banning books, to say at least give individuals a place to use AI, and at least bring it up in the sense, when I say use AI, I mean, if you have Microsoft Copilot, say, okay, we're going to use Microsoft Copilot. It's basic, whatever, but you're going to use this. Please do not use ChatGPT. Or find out who's using what and help them understand the safe ways to go about using this tool. For example, turn off, data training on the model, turn on multi-factor authentication, make sure it's secure and safe, because that is a disaster waiting to happen. So it's not only the concern about like, hey, how can we move fast? It's a very much a concern about how can we make sure that we are avoiding this risk that could come about when people are using AI, not trained properly on it, and don't know. They're trying to do their best. They're trying to help, right? They just don't know probably that they're accidentally training other large language models on your donors' info, on your constituents, private information, things like this might be going in. If they are skeptical about AI, that should probably, um, yeah, wake them up a little bit and have them at least start considering a policy.
Awesome. And then looks like Maria asked in the chat, following up on immediate steps, are there checklists of sorts that we could reference or other resources so that we're giving consideration to the various risks and rewards of using AI in the workplace, especially in our human services sector? And then are there any policy documents that could be a template or starting point? And Maria even asks, should I just ask AI? LOL. So.
Yeah, I think, Annette, we were talking about that. You'll have some resources available, and we'll provide resources as well. At skillspout.com, we have a resources section that can get you started. And yeah, my answer to should you ask AI is yes. Yeah, I think that is helpful, especially if it's specific questions to you that we haven't answered here.
One something that came to mind looking at Kevin's question as well is I heard recently that there was a nonprofit board that found that Acrobat has where you can make a podcast out of a document, and they did that with their financial statements, and that it helped actually like was helpful or at least amusing to listen to pretend people talk through financial statements. Just there is some more creativity, I think, going into these AI tools. And if a board doesn't typically understand financials, maybe they will with the support of AI eventually. So I wouldn't default to instead of having your finance committee chair or treasurer presenting the financials using AI, but it might be useful over time as well.
Oh, what I thought you were going to say is, and it leaked. I'm like, no. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You could do that with if you're a Google team, you could do that with Google Notebook LM, it's called. They have the podcast, so you could put information in there and create a podcast, create audio. It's a great way to get different modes, right? Different ways of reporting information out for sure. And Microsoft has a notebook in Microsoft 365 as well. And I think that is one of their abilities as well. So lots of ways to get that. I love that idea. The multimodal delivery of information is it's great for a lot of people.
I would also love to revisit the environmental question a little bit because I know one thing we've talked about is also we as a society can make higher demands on some of these companies. So I have heard that in Europe they're making data centers much more sustainably than we are here, and we could demand that we as people, as advocates, could demand that we make better decisions about how they're built and what resources they utilize. As a society, some of our elected officials have determined we could subsidize the building of data centers, whereas we could decide that they need to build the power sources rather than pushing those costs to the people. I think there's much more we can do as people and as advocates in this space as well, rather than just allowing this technology to make its own decisions.
That's huge. I think for us, yeah, to look at the state level and what we're doing here, and really ask our leaders to you know, have more governance around AI, more thoughtful decisions made around how energy consumption, yes, all of that. And I think advocating for that in joining groups to advocate for things like that is huge. Yeah.
And that's an especially timely point for those of us here in Cleveland, Ohio. I know our local government has been there's a company that's exploring building a data center here in Cleveland, and so that's the time for those who are Cleveland based, right, to kind of organize and get together and say, okay, what um, if we should do that in our community, that's an open question, right? Should this be in our community? And if it should, what should be the benefits to communities, to our residents, to the people that you serve, to our city, right? For having this as well, right? So I'm not seeing any other questions. So if you have a question, feel free to pop it in. But if not, I'm going to ask one more. I get a lot of questions when I'm doing training about the different types of tools. I know, Mel, you mentioned Copilot, probably with the assumption that a lot of organizations are already purchasing licenses of Microsoft 365. There's even a nonprofit rate for that. That's pretty affordable, right? And so have access to Copilot as a tool on an enterprise basis. But some people might be out there using ChatGPT. Some people might be using Claude. Some people might be using Gemini or other tools. One question I get a lot from nonprofits, how do you go about thinking about a tool or picking a tool that would be right from your organization?
Yeah, I think good rule of thumb is for your organization as a whole, start with what I would consider the Swiss Army knife. What does everybody on your organization have access to? And that's typically going to be either Gemini, if you're a Google if Google's the workspace you use, or Copilot if you're a Microsoft, organization, right? If you're on Microsoft 365. So you're going to get a long way just utilizing those tools that already exist within your workspace environment, right? So how do I go about helping organizations figure this out? I say if that's where I would start, I would build out what are called in Copilot, in Microsoft Copilot world, they call them Microsoft agents. They're in ChatGPT world, they're custom GPTs, and in Google Gemini, they're called gems, but helps build out workflows that your whole organization can use and put these into your agents or your gems. You can get a huge amount of leverage just from those free tools. I mean, we've seen, and JP, I mean, I don't know about you, I've seen organizations um, using those types of tools getting like 10 hours per person back a week, 8 hours, some are less, some are, time a week, but even those basic tools, if you multiply that across all of your days, all of your weeks in a year, right? It's a lot of time back that you can either put towards eating lunch, or maybe working on the projects that have been backing up, or maybe meeting with constituents, donors, etc. There's a lot that you can do with I have found that I can do at the time back, and it's just right there in those simple tools. After that, if you have teams that, for example, as a programmer, I use Claude. I love Claude. That is a large language model that it is really good at programming. So after that, you can look departmentally if you need other large language models. Very rarely so far have I seen a tool that has existed that I'm like, that one's worth it. That is outside of my these general kind of Swiss Army knife tools. And, you might see, nonprofit specific software adding some AI, some of it's better than others. A lot of times they just slap on some large language model and say, yes, we do AI, and it's not very helpful, but some might be. But start with what you already have. You're going to go a long way.
I know many nonprofits are using it with Canva.
Mhm.
Canva has integrated it a lot,
Yeah,
so I've heard that quite a bit.
yeah. Honestly, for now, I haven't found Canva's integration to be that great. I don't know if you've used it, but I'm like, I've tried it a few times and I'm sure it's getting better. But you're right. Like utilizing, there are a lot of connectors you could potentially use. Now be thoughtful about the connections and being safe, because that's a place where information might leak, is when you start adding different connections to it. But yeah, I think there are a lot of connectors out there to tools that you might already use too. But yeah, Canva's a good example of utilizing AI in a very practical way for marketing and design, things like that.
So I know I saw that Julie asked a question about policies. I think we did join Blade, and we did cover that. So I'm gonna given our timing, I'm gonna let Annette just kind of wrap us up. But thank you both for your comments and everything. And Annette, do you have any last messages for the network, or Mel, do you want to say a quick goodbye, and then we'll let Annette have the last word.
Just thanking Annette. Thank you, Annette, and thank you everybody who joined us. And yeah, I'd love to hear from Annette.
Yeah, so I know some of those last questions were kind of about additional resources, and we know that SkillSpout has some on their website, but when the webinar ends, you'll have a survey that will show up, and so please fill that out, because that is what's going to inform what the chamber does. So, is this a first step of other things that we could offer in this space? We can certainly do more in terms of templates, training, but we want to hear from you about what that could look like, or maybe this is all we needed, and you please provide that feedback as well. This will be recorded, or is being recorded, and will be sent out. But just want to thank everyone who's been able to attend today or is listening after the fact, and just reinforcing that the Chamber is here to really provide services and supports that will be helpful for you. Thanks so much to JP and Mel for this conversation today.